We hear you, Mom.
We always have.
Because you have a special way of saying things.
Things like, don't touch that.
What happened to this Woo?
I don't care what kind of phone they have.
Did you sanitize your hands?
I'm not asking you again.
Get back in there and brush them right.
No, I don't want to see the trick you can do with your eyelids.
Can anybody flush around here? Leftovers. Deal with it.
You can keep asking, but the answer's still no.
I'm in the bathroom. Please just give me 1 minute.
You are 16. For the love of all that is holy, put on some clothes.
3 dozen cupcakes by when? No filters on your Zoom call today, okay?
When's the last time you took a shower?
Please do not lick me. Who thought it was okay to sanitize my phone in the dishwasher? It's a good thing you're cute. Remember, watch for 30 seconds or 2 happy birthday songs.
How can we be out? I just bought a whole week's worth of groceries.
You cut what with the good scissors?
That was your teacher on the phone.
Why pay that kind of money when I can sew you a dress? I believe in you.
You can do this.
You are fearfully and wonderfully made. God has a great plan and a big purpose for your life. Don't forget that.
Hey, Mom, we do hear you.
Now heal us.
We love you.
We're so thankful for all the things you say.
And all that you do for us.
Even if we don't always show it.
Happy Mother's Day.
Now get to bed, I'm tired.
Well, we have a guest speaker with us this morning. His name is Dale Miller, and he comes from all over the place. He was started out in Michigan and came to Florida, was in Ohio, was in Iowa, back and forth some of the time, but he's been in ministry several years. Graduated in 1976 from Great Lakes Christian College, and he has spent most of, I guess, the last of these years around Zephyr Hills, Florida. So he's kind of almost a native as much as some of us can be. So we're glad to have Dale and anticipate his message. So, Dale.
I'm not a native, but my wife is. She was born in Zephyr Hills, spent her entire life there, had seen snow once. I took her to North Carolina on vacation to see snow really for the first time. And then in 2000, I was offered a church near my hometown back up in southern Michigan. And in December of 2000, we moved to Michigan. Well, we moved into the parsonage at right next door to the church in that small village that we were in. There was 2 feet of snow on the ground. It was the second time my wife had ever seen snow. She'd never driven in it before in her lifetime. And I'll tell you the difference between people who have not seen snow and those of us that grew up in it. She's standing looking at the snow like, wow. And I'm looking at the snow like, yeah, wow. Anyways, good to be here this morning, and pleasure to have preached the early service and now to come back and speak to you again this morning. I'm going to read from Proverbs 31. I'm using the Message translation of the Scriptures, which is probably not one that most of you are carrying with you if you have your cell phones and you look it up that way, and I know a lot of people find Scripture that way. I'm going to be reading from the Message translation of Proverbs, 31. It's the virtuous woman, and here's how it reads. A good woman is hard to find and worth far more than diamonds. Her husband trusts her without reserve and never has reason to regret it. Never spiteful, she treats him generously all her life long. She shops around for the best yarns and cottons, enjoys knitting and sewing. She's like a trading ship that sails to faraway places and brings back exotic surprises. She's up before dawn preparing breakfast for her family and organizing her day. She looks over a field and buys it. Then with the money she's put aside, plants a garden. First thing in the morning, she dresses for work, rolls up her sleeves, eager to get started. She senses the worth of her work, is in no hurry to call it quits for the day. She is skilled in the crafts of home and hearth, diligent in homemaking. She's quick to assist anyone in need. She reaches out to help the poor. She doesn't worry about her family when it snows. Their winter clothes are all mended and ready to wear. She makes her own clothing and dresses in colorful linens and silks. Her husband is greatly respected when he deliberates with the city fathers. She designs gowns and sells them, brings the sweaters she knits to the dress shops. Her clothes are well made and elegant. She always faces tomorrow with a smile. When she speaks, she has something worthwhile to say, and she says it kindly. She keeps an eye on everyone in her household. She keeps them all busy and productive. Her children respect and bless her. Her husband joins in with words of praise. Many women have done wonderful things, but you have outclassed them all. Charm can mislead. Beauty soon fades. The woman to be admired and praised is the woman who lives in the fear of God. Give her everything she deserves. Festoon her life with praises. May God add the blessing to reading the scripture. Happy Mother's Day, Mom. Moms, I want to share with you that a couple different things about Mother's Day. One, back in the day before we had cell phones, we had landlines. I don't know if all of you remember that or not, but that used to exist. You know, you actually used to have a phone with a cord on it that was attached to a wall someplace. And if you were really lucky, you had a really long cord so you could wander around with it. But back in the day, we used to make phone calls on Mother's Day, and a lot of times those were long-distance phone calls. And I remember, being young enough to remember that we didn't make a lot of long-distance phone calls because they actually charged you to make those. But the most popular day back in that time for phone calls, the busiest day of the year for the phone company was Mother's Day. Do you know what the most busy day of the year for collect phone calls was? Father's Day. Anyways. By the way, my wife is sitting over here in about the third row back, and is the mother of our children, and I've been blessed to have her beside me, and I'm going to speak a little bit more about her as we move through some of these things this morning. But let me share with you that I have preached this sermon before, and the first time that I ever preached this sermon was about 11 years ago. In March of 2010, I was in Iowa, and my mom was living in Zephyrhills, Florida, and about to celebrate her 100th birthday. And so I knew we had to go, and we were going to have this celebration. Now, my mom was about this tall, maybe, weighed less than 100 pounds, was an absolute fantastic cook and baker. She started baking cookies for her own birthday party 3 months in advance. Her freezer was full of cookies because she was going to have this celebration and everyone was going to come. And so I was invited, as with everyone else, for my mom's birthday party. And the preacher who was at her church at that time was an old friend of mine, and he says, "Hey, you're going to be in town. You want to preach that Sunday? I'll take the Sunday off." And I'm like, "Sure, that sounds good to me. I'll do that." And it was a church that I had been a part of at other times. My parents were there, or my mom was there. My father had passed away. And so my mother says, "What are you going to preach?" And I said, "Well, I really like to preach the Gospels. I really like to preach about Jesus because that's what it's all about. That's what we should be focusing on." And she gives me that look that moms give when they're disappointed. And I get that look from my mother, and I'm like, "Okay, Mom, it's your 100th birthday. What would you like me to preach?" And she says, "Well, I was really hoping you would preach about the virtuous woman in Proverbs 31. I'd never preached it before, and I said, "Okay, I can put that together. We can make that happen." So I did. So I preached this for my mom on her 100th birthday, or real close to it. And in addition to that, let me add this. A year later, at 101, my mother passed away. So I was blessed to be able to bring this message to her. But the things that I shared with her are still applicable and apply to us today, and I think we can all benefit from it. Now, guys, this really is directed towards the ladies, but there's a whole lot of application for you. So don't do the turn my hearing aid off thing. Don't tune me out yet. Just kind of listen in, and we'll all benefit a little bit from it. So there are 12 things that follow in this. Now, if you understand the way preaching works, most of the time preachers preach what's called a three-point sermon, and you know that a three-point sermon takes about 30 minutes. I just told you that we're going to do 12 points. That means you're going to be here for 2 hours. Any idea you had of getting to the restaurant before the Baptist, forget it. That's not going to happen, okay? No, honestly, we'll try to get you out of here in time that you can go and have a good Mother's Day meal with your family. So, first thing that this passage of Scripture talks about with Mom is this. Her husband trusts her. Trust means you never have to question. You never have to worry about things. You earn trust, and then you try to hold on to that trust. When I was a teenager, all my friends had curfews. And they'd say to me, well, what's your curfew? And I'm like, what's a curfew? They're like, what time do you have to be home? I said, when I get home. And they're like, that doesn't make sense. How's that work? And I'm like, well, my mom and dad trust me. And they know that if I say I'm going to the basketball game's going to get over at 9:30, and I'm going to come home after the ball game, I'm going to be home by 10 o'clock. And they know that. And that's what I do, and that's the way it works. And that's the way we always handled it, was I didn't have a time frame that I was told, you have to be home by this time. They always said to me, be responsible and don't misuse your responsibility. So I had to earn their trust, and I had to make sure that I was trustworthy and being home when I was supposed to be home. That's the way this whole trust thing works. You say I'm going to be someplace, you do that. In this day and age, that whole idea of trust sometimes has kind of lost its meaning. Doesn't always work like it always used to. And let me add to that, I didn't violate that trust very often. Number 2, she brings him good all her life. My mom and dad were married to each other for 78 years, only to each other. And I always looked at that and I thought how blessed I was that they were together for so long. And in those years, my mother brought my dad a lot of good. And by the same token, she didn't bring him a whole lot of bad. My mom was always on my dad's side. They were always on the same page, always working towards the same ends, always working towards the same goals together. And one of the ways that you bring good is by doing this. You build people up. You always encourage them. You always come alongside them. I love the little video that we had just before the message this morning. Because we do say a lot of things to our kids. But the things our kids really need to hear sometimes is, you did a good job. I'm proud of you. And those kind of things. That's what comes from this, bringing good to the rest of the family. My mother always had my father's back, but she always had my back as well. Number 3, she works with her hands. I was blessed. My mom worked at home, but she was always there. So I always knew that when I came home from school, my mom was going to be there. And what a blessing that was to me. Now let me add, my wife works. She works at trying to keep me in line and come alongside me in ministry. That's what her work is. Now, she doesn't get paid for it, doesn't get a paycheck for it, but let me tell you something. Sometimes the most important and unheard person in the whole church is a preacher's wife. She is that person who always makes sure that when I stand up here in the pulpit, I look like I'm supposed to look, that all those pieces are in the place that they're supposed to be, and if I'm forgetting something, she's reminding me. And by the way, remember this. There is no such thing as a non-working mother. Moms, you know that if you're a mom and you have kids, you have a job. Probably the most important job that anyone could ever have is that job. Number 4, she's up before dawn. Now, some of you don't know what dawn looks like. Dawn's like when the sun comes up. We live on the West Coast, basically, I do weddings on the beach. That's one of the jobs that I work at. And so I see a lot of sunsets. And I really had this thought this morning about, well, you know what? We could get up and we could drive over to the coast, over to the beach and watch the sunrise. And that thought was in my brain for about 30 seconds. It's like, no, you're not going to get up that early to go watch sunrise. Okay. Some of you don't understand what dawn is, and that's okay, but that's what Scripture says. Number 5. She looks at a field and buys it. I think I was in junior high school. My parents had decided that they wanted to buy property up north. Now, in Michigan, up north is a destination you go to. And they decided that they wanted a place that we were going to make our summer place, our winter place, our go and have fun place, all that different things. And my father and I found 120 acres. And by the way, just so you have some perspective of where dollars are, we could have bought that 120 acres for $22 an acre back in that day. Okay, we didn't buy it. My bank account today is saying we really probably should have, but we didn't. But my mom looked at that piece of property that my father and I looked at. We were drooling over it. And my mom says, this isn't the place. This isn't where we need to be. We ended up buying a much smaller piece of property, put a house on it, and my parents retired there. But that became the home that all of us had memories of. All of us had all those very fond moments in life that we would go to spend time at Mom and Dad's place up in the woods up in northern Michigan. Mom was smart when it came to that stuff. Blessed is a man who has a wife who is wise with money. She's skilled in the crafts of home and hearth, diligent in homemaking. It was always interesting to me. I'd go to my mom's house, and the refrigerator would be there, and I'd open it up, and I'd be like, what are we going to have for lunch? Now, I knew my mom could cook, and I knew she could prepare something. I just would look at it. I didn't see anything. And my mom would say, don't you worry about it. Go sit down. And by the time she had dinner ready, I'm looking and I'm saying, this is a feast fit for a king, I never could understand how she did that, but she was always able to do that. And I know a lot of you mothers are the same way. We'll look at things, we don't see it in the same perspective that you see it, but that's the way life goes sometimes. We look at different things differently, and moms have that skill, that gift of being able to see what's not there to be able to create what needs to be there. Number 6, she extends her hand to the needy. My mother was such a good cook. All my friends knew that my mom was a good cook because they all came to my house to eat. Now, and the way that worked was like this. She never knew how many people were going to be at a dinner table. So I may come in with 1 friend or 2 friends or 3 friends, and my mom would always have food enough to feed all of us. And she was always generous with that when any of our friends would come, would never complain about it, just knew that that was part of what we did in life to provide. I will share with you that when we were living in the same place in Michigan I told you about before, my daughter was a brand new student in the elementary school that we had, that was in our community. And there was another girl that was a brand new student at about the same time that she was. And so my daughter and this girl became best friends. And she was a good kid from a good family, and just they connected, a lot of same interests. I didn't find out until they graduated from high school that this girl spent most of her high school years living with us, spending the night with my daughter in her bedroom. I mean, they were pretty quiet about it and pretty good about all that good stuff. And what a blessing it was to have this young lady, this young girl living with us. I didn't even know she was there because she was so quiet. You reach out to those kind of people because she needed a stable home that she wasn't finding in her own home. And she found that with us and found that comfort level that was there. Mom always made my friends feel loved. They always knew that when they came to my house, that my mom was going to treat them just like she treated me. And they always knew that was a good place to go and a safe place to go. That's the way moms need to be. I remember one time in the church that I grew up in, they were having an annual budget meeting discussing what they were going to do and how money was going to be spent and all that good stuff. And they had decided that they were going to cut the missions giving. That was just something that they couldn't afford to do, and they were going to cut missions back. And I don't know what, they gave a certain percentage, and we were going to cut the percentage back. And they started to take the vote. All in favor, and most of the hands went up. All those opposed, my mom put her hand up. Why are you opposed to this? And she says, because we need to raise our giving, not lower it. And God will provide, and that's what we need to do. And my mother took that bold step of faith, and the church said, well, yeah, Mrs. Miller, you're probably right, let's do that. So they did, and they actually raised their mission giving, and that year they had the best year financially that church had ever had. That's understanding that there are people out there who have needs that we can provide for, and identifying that and reaching out to those particular areas. My mom was that person who stood up to do that. Number 7, she's ready when it snows. You've all heard the stories about people up north where they actually have snow. We walk 2 miles uphill every day to school in 2 feet of snow. Those stories are all true, by the way. Okay. And it was both uphill to school and uphill coming home from school. Well, maybe not all true, but anyways. That's the way we approach life. My mom always made sure that when I had to go out and get in that stuff, that I was ready to weather the storms that were out there. But there are a lot of other storms that you weather in life. This past year with COVID, you've had to weather some storms. You've had to learn how to deal with your children being at home instead of in school sometimes. You've had to learn how to deal with that whole social distancing thing and the whole mask thing and all that other stuff. And hopefully, moms, we've done a good job with our kids and helping them to go through those things so that they weather the storms of life that they have to go through. Number 8, she makes her own clothing. My mom was a seamstress. She was one of those people who could sit down with a pattern and the material and create something beautiful. And what she would do would be to make these suits that matched for both my mom and my dad. So there were Sundays that they'd show up at church. My father would be wearing a pink sport coat because my mother had pink material, and that's what she was wearing. And everyone would be looking at that like, oh, that is so cool. Where'd you get that? Where'd you buy that? And my mom would always just smile because she had made it. You couldn't buy it. And that's the way she was. And I think the other aspect that comes out of that passage of Scripture is she always looks good. She always looks good. Number 9, her husband is respected when he sits with the city fathers. Really don't have to take a whole lot of time talking about what that all means, but this is the point of the matter. Every man wants to feel valued. Every man wants to know that he's worth something. And the best place for that man to get that is from his wife. The best place for our children to get that same value is from their moms, so that they understand that value, that they're respected. You build them up, you encourage them, you let them know how important they are. And let me tell you something. I'm the youngest of 3 sons. I'm the baby. And I was supposed to have been the daughter. My mother was so disappointed when I was born. She called me Dale. And by the way, what a Dale is a depression. So I always laughed at my mom about that. I said, why'd you call me that? And she had some excuse. But anyways, I always looked at that. But the other side of the coin was, Mom would always tell me, you're my favorite. And I believe that. Okay, Mom, I'm the favorite. So after my mom's passed, I'm talking to my next older brother, who's 8 years older than I am. And I'm like, hey, Colin, what? I said, I was always Mom's favorite. And he's like, oh, yeah, really? And I'm like, yeah, that's right. She always told me that. He says, you know what? What? Mom always told me that I was her favorite. So just depending upon which one of us was with her at whatever given moment it was, we all knew that we were the favorite. But, she made us feel that way no matter what. Number 10, excuse me. She faces tomorrow with a smile. There's nothing like a smile to change this world around and to bring some good things into life. There's a story that's told about a family who had a son, and that son was very, very optimistic. This kid looked at life like it was the greatest thing that could ever happen, was so excited about every single moment of every single day. And his parents look at him and they're like, But you know what? There are bad things that happen. We need to help him to prepare for some of the bad things that's going to happen. How do we help him to understand everything's not always good and that sometimes there's bad things that happen? And they finally came to the conclusion the best way to teach him that was they would fill his bedroom with horse manure. And he walks in the room and sees it. And they expect that he's going to be like, what in the world have you done to my room? And instead, he grabs a shovel and he starts shoveling horse manure all over the place. I'm like, what in the world are you doing? He says, all this horse manure in here, there's got to be a horse here someplace. Okay. You know, we want children who have that kind of attitude in life. You know what? There may be a whole bunch of stuff out there that I don't want to deal with, but if I can get through it, I'm a better person for it. And our mothers instill that in us. They give us that sense of saying, there's good things out there. We just have to find them. We have to work for them sometimes. We have to search for them. We have to go after them and have that smile on our face. So we teach our kids to smile all the time. Number 11, she has something worthwhile to say. She says it kindly. You know, we heard the little video of all the things that Mom says, and we probably could add a whole bunch more things to that. But you know what? A lot of times Mom says stuff and they don't think we're really listening, but we are. And we're really paying attention. So for those times, Mom, and I know my mother's in heaven, but Mom, for those times you didn't think I was listening, I really was. I really did get that lesson. I really did learn from it because my mother knew so much and gave me so much and put so much good into my life. There's a rule that goes something like this. If you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. Mothers practice speaking with kindness. I'd like to read just the last few verses of this passage I read to you this morning once again. It says, she keeps an eye on everyone in her household. She keeps them all busy and productive. Her children respect and bless her. Her husband joins in with words of praise. And then it says this, many women have done wonderful things, but you have outclassed them all. But you have outclassed them all. Charm can mislead, beauty fades. The woman to be admired and praised is a woman who lives in the fear of God. Give her everything she deserves. Festoon her life with praise. You have outclassed them all. That is the approach, that is the attitude that I have towards moms. So if you haven't told your mom yet that today, well, you say, hey, Mom, happy Mother's Day, I love you. Mom, there's a lot of good people out there, but you have outclassed them all. Finally, number 12, the woman to be praised is the woman who lives in the fear of God. My mom taught me a lot of different things. My mother was that person who helped me to understand a lot of life's mysteries that I had to learn to understand. I suppose I wasn't probably even 2 years old, and the church I grew up in hired a new preacher. And by the way, that church hired and fired preachers every 2 years. I don't know how they continue to exist, but that's what their pattern was. They fired this guy 3 different times. He just wouldn't leave. So they hired this guy to come in. He moved in right across the street from my mom and dad, and he said to my dad, you have these 3 boys, you need to get them in church. And my dad says, well, I guess you're right, do. And so my mother and father started taking me to church when I was so little, I don't even remember how young I was when I first started. So I ended up being taken to church, not sent to church. And my mom became a Sunday school teacher. My dad became an elder. And so I knew what all the inner workings of the church was. But in large part, it was because my mom was that person who brought me up in the faith, taught me the things I needed to learn so that I would have a trusting relationship with Jesus Christ. I was in high school. I developed double vision, totally out of the blue. No reason for it to happen, just happened. And I'd been to see the eye doctor, and the doctor said, yep, you have double vision. And what are we going to do about it? He says, well, it's not an eye problem. It's a nerve problem of some sort. You have to go and have some tests run. You're going to go to one of the bigger hospitals, and they're going to run some stuff to figure out what's going on with your eyes. and why you're having that issue. And so I went in the bathroom on a Friday night, because I'm going to go into this hospital on Sunday afternoon. I went in the bathroom on Friday night, I washed my face, and when I lifted my head back up from having washed my face, my double vision was gone. I said to my mom, "Mom, I'm not seeing double anymore." And she says, "Okay. Are you sure?" I'm like, "Yeah, everything's fine. I'm seeing like I'm supposed to see." I said, "How'd that happen?" And she says, "Don't you think that some people have been praying for you? Don't you know that you need to trust God with that?" And I hadn't thought about it. I mean, I was a person of faith. I was a Christian. I'd been baptized. I'd made my decision for Christ. But I had never thought about, you pray about things like that, and all of a sudden here I am with that taken care of. It was my mom that taught me that spiritual lesson along with a lot of others. The woman to be respected is that person who lives in the fear of God. You have been blessed to have good, godly mothers in your life. And I know not everyone's always had good, godly mothers, but you can be that good and godly mother for your children and for your grandchildren and those people around you who need that. And I will go ahead and add this as well. I've had a lot of different moms. I have my birth mother, who was truly my mom, and that's what I've been talking about. But there were a lot of other women in my life who were moms of my friends who always made me feel like I was one of theirs and that I was accepted by them. And those people all hold that special place as well. So no matter where you are in that whole area of life, make sure that people know that they are loved and that you love them, that you care about them. I'm not offering an invitation this morning. If you're not in a relationship with Jesus and that's something that you want to know more about, you can certainly speak to me today. You can speak to Gerald. Mike's going to be back next week. Speak to him. But find that relationship, and we'll honor moms today. We're going to have our closing song, and I'm going to step off. So if you guys are ready.